Welcome back to another episode of our Uncovering Possibilities podcast, sponsored by Texas Career Engagement. I'm joined by my teacher, Professor Jerry Junkin.
Great to be with you, of course, as it always is.
Yes, agreed. So can we just start, will you just tell a little bit about yourself and your professional work with our audience?
Sure. So my day job, I'm the director of bands here at the University of Texas in Austin, where I conduct the wind ensemble, teach graduate conducting. I'm head of the conducting and ensembles division. And this coming year is year number 35.
Wow.
Which is ridiculous. It's because it's gone by like that, I have to say. And then in addition to that, of course, so as we'll talk about, I'm the artistic director and conductor of the Dallas Winds. This coming season is year number 30.
Wow.
For me with that. And then in addition to that, as we're filming this, tomorrow I leave to go to Hong Kong for the first time since pre-pandemic. So I'm really looking forward to that. I conduct a group over there. This was the 20th season of the Hong Kong Wind Philharmonia. And then in November, I'll return to Japan for the first time since pre-COVID. So that I've been doing this, that's year number 15, I think. So that sort of catches us up on all my gigs.
So let's talk about Dallas Winds in particular. So just for the audience, our audience members that aren't sure, can you tell us more about the ensemble, how your work with them began and whatnot?
Yes. Obviously, it's a professional wind band, started 40 years ago by the dynamic duo of Kim Campbell, who next season will be retiring after 40 years as the executive director of the group. But he was a founder along with the founding conductor, Howard Dunn. Howard had been teaching in Texas for a number of years, had been the band director at Lake Highlands High School, Richardson High School, but was on the faculty at SMU when this project began. And so it started out as a reading band, and the players in the group had such fun doing it at the first rehearsal, they wanted to keep it going. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later. But Howard conducted the group for 5 years, unfortunately passed away after being diagnosed with cancer. And that process took a while, and they had guest conductors, and then I came on 30 years ago.
That's remarkable. So the Dallas Winds is, I think, irrefutably the best known professional wind ensemble in the country. What do you attribute to that success?
Well, not to be flippant about it, but it's the only one. So that's one of the reasons it's the most well known. But seriously, there's a whole part of this discussion we should have is because I've often wondered, why isn't there a Cincinnati Wind Symphony and a Chicago Wind Symphony and a Baltimore, and there have been attempts to make those. I know we'll talk more about that later, but why is this the only one, and why has it stuck? So I think part of it has to do with the spirit of the staff of Kim Campbell, being absolutely unrelenting in keeping the group afloat, because there's been some difficult times over the years financially, but they've persevered. There's also been this amazing, and I don't take this for granted, truly amazing buy-in on the part of the players, on the musicians, who, when there have been times when they've done concerts for, $50 or whatever for the whole cycle, only because that the budget was just in such a terrible place at that moment. But they also had an investment. They wanted to keep the group going. Fortunately, we have not had any of those situations for quite some time, but they were, some of the longtime members gave up a lot, in order to keep things going. So the vast majority, I think if we took a poll of the players, of the musicians, love playing in that band. That's why I think the thing continues, and why it is so successful is because of the buy-in on the part of the players.
How do you instill that as the conductor or music director?
Well, fortunately, I walked into it, when I think that was already part of the DNA of the group, because they loved working with Howard. Everyone wanted to keep the group going out of respect, for Howard. But now we've had probably 60% turnover since those days via auditions. So fortunately, the people who we have brought into the fold, for the most part, all feel the same way. They're very devoted to the group. One of the things you want to do is just make sure that the vibe is right all the time. With a professional organization, that's not always easy to do. And I'm sure in the early days of my association with them, I may have handled things not as well as maybe I would handle them now, because you learn on the job.
Right.
But a lot of that becomes interpersonal relationships. The music making has to be good, obviously. The programming has to be good. It has to be music that the instrumentalists, that the musicians are interested in playing and they feel gratified to perform. And there's a lot of factors that go into this. Still, though, why aren't there more groups like this?
I want to pose the question to you because it's obviously something that you've thought about.
A lot. I mean, what happens just nationally, and I want to, but there's some large music schools. Well, how many flute majors do they have, at any one time? And especially when you replicate that all across the country, what happens to everybody? There's 1 or 2 applied flute jobs per year if you count military bands plus orchestras.
Right.
So what happens to all? Well, I'm not saying they don't have interesting lives, but wouldn't they like to play in a group, that maybe existed like this somewhere? So I've always been a little perplexed as why it doesn't happen, but I think that the model of the Dallas Winds has been a good one in that the impetus for continuing the group after that first reading session came from the players. So I think if you can have the buy-in from the players, that helps rather than a conductor or a local philanthropist or something like that trying to start a group. I think if it comes from the players, then it has a chance. You have at least a fighting chance.
How do you cultivate that esprit de corps like amongst the members of the ensemble besides through programming? Is that something that can be quantified or replicated, and how?
I don't know that there is a specific formula. There's, it's like everything. There's a symbiosis, so it all has to work together somehow. So yeah, the repertoire, you have to balance it so that it is not so demanding that the players feel exhausted all the time, but it can't be, they also have to feel challenged up to a certain point at a certain level, and they have to enjoy performing the music. I'll just mention, we just did a concert as we were recording this. We ended the season, the 22-23 season. So the printed program was in Storm and Sunshine March of Heed, which we hadn't played. I don't know that the group had ever played that march. I've never conducted it in my life, but we wanted to play Circus March. But then 2 big pieces, Losing Earth of Adam Schoenberg, which is a percussion concerto written for Jake Nisley with the San Francisco Symphony. So we brought in Jake, and he was the amazing soloist with us. Second half was Kevin Day's Concerto for Wind Ensemble, which is we're recording. This is still a relatively new piece, nominated for a Pulitzer Prize, really a very effective piece. But both of those pieces clearly new to the ensemble. And Kevin's piece is difficult. I mean, from a technical sense, for everyone in the group, it's a virtuosic piece. And Adam Schoenberg doesn't know how to write easy music. So, both of those things were challenging, but I felt like we could, in a way, get away with it because it was the end of a season.
Yeah.
And sort of the culmination of this season's experiences, working with a world-class soloist, world-class composers, both of them. Due to health reasons, Adam was not able to be there, but Kevin was with us. To a person, at least the people who spoke to me after the concert really enjoyed playing that concert. So that was a good mix. But I don't know that would be the right formula for every single concert we play.
Of course.
Because that was all new music to the group, basically.
Yeah. I'd love for you to bring into the conversation about the role of the audience and just sort of the community support, because I imagine that there may be a lot of people listening that have some collection of players that would be keen on something like this, but maybe they're missing that link.
This all works together so that I don't know where development, financial development, philanthropic development for an organization, and where marketing, those have to all coexist, So the marketing part of it becomes very important, because if a potential audience member doesn't know that this concert is happening, then it's all in a vacuum, So you have to, in the vernacular, put butts in seats. How do you do that? And I think in the beginning of a group, and I think we're still attempting to really hit our stride with this. Well, I'll back up a little bit. In this day and age, the day of people buying a season subscription and paying for all of this, those days are over. That doesn't happen. It doesn't happen for the Boston Symphony, the New York Philharmonic. It doesn't happen for the Dallas Winds, right, where people are going to pay for the entire season and they'll be there. So I think almost every presenting organization has gone to mini subscriptions, MINI, mini packages,
right,
etc. So you can build your own subscription. So that's a thing now. Then I think you have to do marketing whether that is via, radio advertising, social media, which has got to be again, in our time, social media is so prevalent. You have to capitalize on that. So all those things have to work together. And then you find those people who become passionate about the organization. Then you can reach out to them to maybe, this is why they call it development, after all, to develop a relationship in which they would financially be comfortable or desire to help the group, or sometimes offer.
In your tenure, I mean, it doesn't sound like you've got it all figured out, but it sounds like a lot of the pieces are certainly in place.
Yeah, but I don't have it all figured out. That's for sure. And I think all of us who are involved in this have to look at it that everything is our job. There are some, the executive director obviously has very specific things. The operations director has very specific things on their portfolio, but yet we're all working together, so it doesn't only fall to the director of marketing, and that's the only person who can think of marketing. That sort of goes across everything, as any kind of development does. So fundraising, you never know when you're going to be talking to someone who one day might be in a position to help the organization. We rely on people's generosity all the time, because with the Dallas Winds, like every performing arts organization I know, only 50% or maybe even slightly less of the budget comes from ticket sales. All the rest of it is grants, agencies, personal philanthropic donations.
So,
important part of it.
Moving back to the conversation about all of those graduating musicians that are trying to figure out their careers and whatnot, I'd actually like to shift gears a little bit and talk about folks that leave high school, whether it be musicians or visual artists, dancers, theater, etc. What are ways that you think that we can provide more opportunities for students?
Again, you have to make a connection, something that could be of interest to a high school student, but also on the other hand, the high school student has to be in a mindset that they would be open to exploring that as well. I don't think this is a controversial statement, but I will talk to kids who are in high school who will profess, they may not use the word burnout, but they're exhausted. They've become exhausted by the experience, and they're ready to just take a little hiatus, a little time away from it. Understandable thought. Unfortunately, when they take the time away from it, coming back to it becomes increasingly difficult the longer that goes. And so there's never a year where someone doesn't knock on my office door and say, oh, Professor Junkin, I've been on campus for like 3 years, and you conducted me in an all-region band once, and you said that I should keep playing, but I didn't, and now I'd really like to get back in it, but I don't have an instrument. So it's difficult to come back to it. Just like if you quit playing piano, it's difficult to pick it back up in a few years. So yes, what are the opportunities that we should be giving high school students? Here we have a lot of opportunities, I think, and it runs the gamut. So it's not just specifically related to band type ensembles, concert bands,
right,
which anyone on campus can participate in. We have bands that are overwhelmingly non-major in the spring, but then there's a mariachi group on campus. There's a non-major percussion ensemble. There are jazz combos that are in many cases made up of non-majors. So I think there are opportunities, but it becomes a marketing thing as well, right? So that people know that there are those opportunities, because so often the mindset is, oh, yeah, if I'm not a music major, I don't think I can be a part of that. But that's not the case. It's not the case here. It's not the case virtually everywhere.
Right.
You say, okay, well, I'm going to the University of Rochester, but I'm not going to be in the Eastman School. So I'm sure, well, at the University of Rochester, there are non-music major ensembles.
Yes.
So
a great example.
Yeah. So every place. I was just telling a group today that was visiting on campus that I don't know of a college or university anywhere that wouldn't be happy to have them, because they're coming from a very fine band, but to participate somewhere on their program, and there are opportunities for them, even if it's not going to be the big-time marching band or the elite concert organizations. There are, universities, that's the great thing about a big university. It's like a cafeteria rather than a specialized restaurant.
Right.
There's a lot to choose from, and the menu is large.
Do a lot of the folks that come to the Dallas Winds concert, they had music in their life, or they were making music regularly, and now they're mostly patrons and attendees, or?
I would be able to answer that question better in about a month because we just started yesterday. We opened an audience survey for all of our subscribers, but also the people who attended a concert, whether they bought a single ticket or a subscription all season long. So we just sent that out. So we have a few days before we know what the results are. So they're culling a lot of information from that about, hey, what are the demographics of our audience? What is the predominant age group? We did one of these a number of years ago, and I thought my preconceived notion was this will produce results that vary greatly from probably what the Dallas Symphony Orchestra's, nope, exactly the same. Everything, and to me that was a little disappointing to know that, because I thought maybe our reach would be slightly different. I do think that there are, we make a definite effort to reach out to school bands, and to their directors so that the directors can get heavily discounted tickets to bring their students so they can see a live performance in the Meyerson Symphony Center, which is an amazing hall, to see a concert by the Dallas Winds. So again, what we're trying to do is develop an audience, and orchestras are facing this. Everyone's facing the same thing. How do you reach younger audiences?
Right.
Millennials and younger, because they're at a point in their lives when they're making relationships, but they're also maybe they're starting out as a family, and the time is a premium. So how do you reach them and get them to come to even one concert? So that's a challenge.
It feels like it could be cultivated based on their experience being in music, going through secondary school.
Don't you think so?
I do. But I also imagine, too, talking about the demographics of who comes to the concerts, I would think that you would have a pretty good pulse on that simply because you're turning out and you're seeing who's sitting behind you as you're conducting.
Yes, but and this is why I'll be interested to see the survey, because now we moved away from the model of a person buys a subscription for the season. The Meyerson seats these days like 1,935 people, something like that. It used to be slightly larger, but now there's a stage extension, etc. So it's interesting that I think at its peak, we had over 1,000 subscribers, but now it's like, the number seems negligible because you have all these overlapping smaller mini subscriptions and things. So it's just, and everyone I've talked to, everyone who's in executive position or just members of orchestras, everybody saying the same thing. It's just like, that's no longer the model. Right. At the Metropolitan Opera, you don't buy out the season now. Don't buy a single long subscription. And so different sort of thing. So I'll be interested to know, and I don't know that we'll be able to pinpoint it at the end of this, but I'll be that we can. If some of what is being driven by programming, what is just being driven by sheer luck. Sometimes this concert that we just had in April, which again, I was very proud of the concert. I was very proud of the product. I thought that the group played beautifully. It wasn't our largest concert in terms of audience, but it turns out it's right at the time when all the standardized testing is going on.
Right. Yes.
So it's very difficult to get school kids out. I totally understand that. So I think there are these things where it goes like this during this season.
Right. And I'm sure some of it is predictable year over year, and some of it you just don't know what the state is going to decide when they're going to set their testing.
Exactly. So for next season, we're planning on doing a concert in January. We have not given a concert in January for a while because January just became a tough sell. After Christmas, everybody's just like ready to cool it for a little while, So we're going to give it a try again next year and see what results that produces.
That's great. Folks that are listening to this that run community ensembles or community music, and they look to the Dallas Winds as, the model, what words of advice or wisdom would you give them?
You would think, okay, well, that's an easy thing, but it's not, because a community ensemble is a different animal. I mean, the Dallas Winds is where the players are not on a contract, but it still is a fully professional group, so everyone is getting paid per, there are two pay scales, one for principal players, one for section players, but they're being paid. In a community group, you have nothing but volunteers, which is one of the endearing things about it. Everyone is there because they want to be there. So with the Dallas Winds, it kind of becomes a combination. Like I spoke to earlier, the people in that group love playing in the group. So they're devoted to it, but yet they're also being compensated. Whereas, if we just look here locally, the Austin Symphonic Band, which is a great band with a wonderful tradition. Richard Floyd, for so many years, was the music director, conductor of that group. It's one of the great success stories of American community bands. But all those people are there because they love music and they just love playing in a great band together. So that's why they do it. So I think for a community-based group like that, the first thing is there has to be a feeling of artistic satisfaction on the part of the players. So we can talk about the audience later, but the players have to feel that their soul has been nourished somehow by being a part of this. Not unlike the professional musician, but for a community, if it's not there, they'll just leave. They don't have to do it.
Right.
So that's the main thing is if you have a very fine musician who's the conductor playing really great music in a beautiful way, well, then people want to be a part of that.
It sounds so simple.
It's not, though. If I had to make a hierarchical, some sort of list about what are the most important things that I do in terms of the Dallas Winds, I think the concert programming has got to be at the very top, or at least amongst the top. Obviously, the music making, the preparation, all as it goes in. But for first thing is, what is it that you're going to prepare? So the music, the way those pieces are put together, that has an appeal or not to an audience. Here at UT, I could do some weird concert. Everybody, we all sit around on rugs at midnight and play, whatever. and nobody likes it. Everybody leaves. It's okay. Then over time, you can build your audience back.
Right.
You can't afford to do that with a professional group. You can challenge the audience, but I think it has to be encased in something or explained to them in such a way that they know what's going on. Because if you run off all your subscribers, all your ticket buyers, well, the group is doomed.
Do you ever find things being at odds regarding programming for yourself as an artist, for your ensemble members, and then also for the audience? Or do you find that typically it's pretty straightforward, or I don't want to say easy, but trying to achieve all of the goals of keeping everybody happy in this symbiotic relationship that you mentioned before?
Yes, I don't think you can keep everyone happy. And I think if you did, you'd be doing a disservice to someone in the equation. Whether it's the audience, whether it's the players in the group, whether it's, for my own satisfaction, whatever it is, or for the music that's being performed. So I think it's all becomes a big balancing act. So it can't all be standard repertoire because that doesn't challenge the musicians, But on the other hand, it can't be all the latest thing, composed yesterday, because maybe the audience doesn't have a perspective on all of that, how it fits in. So, for instance, at last night's concert, I talked about Adam's piece a bit. Kevin Day spoke about his piece, speaking to the audience, and there's always a pre-concert lecture, because I think those things all together help the presentation, especially when it's music with wind ensemble music that's almost always largely unfamiliar to an audience. So there's got to be some trust, If the audience knows it, I trust these people. I don't know any of these pieces, but I usually like it, so I'll give it a try.
Moving into a conversation more about yourself, what skills, and they could be artistic skills or otherwise, do you feel best support you in your everyday work, professional working musician, conductor, teacher?
It's hard to, because that changes day by day almost, right? I think you have to have some enthusiasm for what you do, right? There has to be a reason why you're doing this. And as everyone knows, this is the world's worst get-rich-quick scheme. It's not about that. I mean, you have to be, you have to feed your own soul. You have to be nourished by what you're doing. For me, I love it. I grew up with it. I was going to band concerts when I was in the womb, so literally a part of my DNA. My father was a high school band director, all those things. I've always really loved it. I've loved the repertoire. I've loved the challenge of the new repertoire, not doing the same pieces over and over and over.
Right. I mean, you're truly antithetical to like the old curmudgeon-y academic. I mean, it is sort of exactly what you're alluding to. So I'm curious, is that the same thing that you're bringing between both groups? Sort of this infectious energy. I don't want to say hyper because that makes it seem like something pejorative, but this sort of incredibly positive conductor teacher.
That's what I'm going for, and especially when you love something, you want to share it with people,
Yes.
It's like these pieces all have great stories about them. And so I like telling the stories, in addition to just trying to bring the music to life. Like the other day, we were talking about score study. Mm-hmm. And I have this, it's hard for me to talk about score study because I love it, because it doesn't feel like work. A study implies that you're really, you've got a candle and a desk and
17 colored pencils.
Yes, out of tea. It's like, and I'm not making light of it, but it's just like I have to tell myself to quit, because it's like the time goes so fast, you get so absorbed in it.
Yeah.
Because you love it, because it doesn't feel like work, So I think if you're fortunate enough to find something where your work is your play, that's just the best. My work here influences what I do in Dallas. The work that I do in Dallas impacts what I do here. Specifically, with a professional group, you have to move quickly. There's usually 4 rehearsals, sometimes only 3, and then boom, we give a concert. So those rehearsals are 2.5 hours each with a 15-minute mandated break at some point. So, what is that? You figure, okay, really useful time. There's 6 to 8 hours, preparation for a concert. Well, here we do 6 rehearsals of 1 hour and 50 minutes each, usually without a break, except that we're changing personnel and all that sort of stuff. So it equates to about the same amount of time in preparation. So that is a new schedule for us over the last few years. We've migrated to this where we used to take 9, 12 rehearsals, So my work in Dallas helped me to do that and helped me to know how to do that well here. The things that I really love are the students. I love that with this situation, the students who play in the group. I love the graduate students, working with them, whether it's one-on-one, whether it's in groups, and just as part of a team. I love that. And I think the enthusiasm of younger people helps my enthusiasm level. If I didn't have that, I'm not sure, I think I would still be enthusiastic about all this because I love the music and I love doing it, but I think it certainly helps. But then I can bring that to the plate in Dallas too. So the things work together, I think, quite well. I wouldn't want to do one without the other. I mentioned earlier, I've got these opportunities to go to Hong Kong, Japan, where those are different situations. In Hong Kong, it's all professional musicians as well. It's all modeled after the Dallas Winds. And in Japan, it's a student group. I'm fortunate I'm in this situation where one thing informs how the other goes. So I don't feel like there's a huge change between what I do here and what I do in Dallas. People ask me that all the time. So what's it like when it's like, it's just the same. I just go conduct.
Well, maybe you can extend that too to working with high school students through clinics and through honor bands. Is it the same? It's the same person, conductor, teacher in all of those different contexts, or
I hope so.
You switch?
No, I think so. And especially when it comes down to the physical act of conducting, I never change anything. I mean, I just do it the way I know to do it. So working with younger groups, whether it's high school groups or middle school groups, which I will still do on occasion, I'll always start a piece. And very often what happens is I'll conduct the first note and nobody will play. All right, okay,
Where's your count on?
Yeah, right. So it'll be fine. We'll do it again. And then, some people will laugh but it's like, I'm not going to compromise, and you know what? They get it quickly. It never takes more than 2 or 3 times. And then we're off and running, when we're making music together. So I think kids are actually quite adaptable. And I try to conduct the pieces the way I think they go and then just have them play them the way I'm conducting.
Right.
If we can do those 2 things, I think it usually stands a chance.
Absolutely. And saves a hell of a lot of time as well.
I think so.
So our podcast, our content series is called Uncovering Possibilities, and it's really targeted towards graduate students, postdocs in the arts that are looking to potentially have more of these portfolio careers similar to what you have, a full-time academic job, and then also work with the Dallas Winds and other outside opportunities. Can you share any bits of advice or anything that you may think may be relevant not only to musicians, but artists in general across multiple disciplines?
Just to be open to be open to opportunities when they arise, even when they're not the ones you were seeking.
Right.
So for instance, if I can make this about the Dallas Winds, when I was first contacted about the Dallas Winds, Howard had passed away. They had had 3 seasons of guest conductors, people who were helping to keep the thing going. They called and asked if I would come to a concert. I was happy to help. So I'm getting ready to tell you something I don't think I've ever told anybody before. So anyway, I go up there, I conduct this concert, and I just was there to help. I knew what the situation was. I didn't know that what they were doing was conducting a search, that it was a job interview. Had I known, I might have messed it up because I would have been nervous or something, but that was the farthest thing from my mind. So, and right after that concert, they were very nice, and they asked me if I would start as the music director. And so Kim Campbell pushed the idea. He said, we're just, after Howard's passing and all this, the financial part is really difficult. So would you consider doing it for a year with no fee? We would just pay your expenses. And so I thought about that, and I wrote it back. I said, no, but I'll do it for 3 years, because I think it's going to take more than 1 season to get this thing financially on its foot. So you don't need to pay me for 3 years. Do it for expenses. And then hopefully at that time we can get to where the musician's pay scale is back up. Now, I was in a position where I could do that because I had a day job.
Right.
I had this, and I felt like it was an interesting project, and if it wouldn't have been the right match at some point, there was no long-time commitment there. I could have just left. But, it turned out to be a really happy marriage. Not to make this all up now that I've used the word marriage.
Please.
But every time I'm back there, I feel like it's this kind of like a musical love affair, because I've got this relationship back home that is steady and long-lasting. And I go up there and I see these people. We get together like once a month and have a great time. And I'm back here. So it's sort of almost feels like that, like I'm cheating somehow on the UT Wind Ensemble because I'm having such a great time with the Dallas Winds,
right. Well, and it's got to be such a different energy going from, essentially seeing students for at the most, 4 years to, I'm sure, musicians that you've worked with for probably your whole tenure.
Yes, but there's kind of a youth movement afoot in the Dallas Winds because, the pandemic was difficult for everyone. So that meant that there were some people who just decided maybe this is the time to retire.
Yeah.
So we've had like 9, or will have by the end of this summer, 9 auditions, 9 openings, which is a lot for that group. That's, that's almost 20% of the group. So that will have turned over in a year's period of time. And in every case, those hires have worked out beautifully, and so they fit right in to the culture, and they're helping, not just showing up and playing beautifully, which they are, but, helping with like the youth band program and all this stuff. They're really a part of the fabric of the group, which is great to see.
Thank you so much for taking this time with us.
Absolutely. I enjoyed it, Tyler. We'll do it again sometime.
Yes, I look forward to it.